Hi, it's Craig and Richard here for our week 3 feedback video, and it's good to be back in the studio.
Yeah, back from Taiwan.
Yes, had a great time over there, but we're here to explore what's been happening this week for our thousands of learners all around the world. So this week has been big on the cognitive practices, the big four as we like to call them, and one of them perception. And of course, from a mindfulness perspective, we're not trying to look at the world through rose-coloured glasses. We just really want to see things as they are.
Clean the glasses, perhaps.
That's right, clean the glasses, and not too dark, and just see things as they are. And that's really helpful, and a number of learners are really giving some good observations on that.
Amazing observations.
Yeah. Also at night. Night's a big challenge, isn't it? Because at night there's very little, relatively speaking, to connect the mind with. So it's a time when the mind likes to run off into its own little world, and the mind does a lot of imagining. And if we're just grounded enough and mindful to see imagination for what it is, like if I invited all the learners now to imagine a tiger for me, and so you can picture a tiger. Now, I don't know if you're afraid or not that imaginary tiger is actually going to eat you. Probably not, because you know it's imagination. But do we remember that in the middle of the night at 2 or 3 in the morning, that what the mind's bringing forth is imagination?
Seems pretty real, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Because if we get lost in it, just like at a movie, if we get lost at a movie, lost in it, we kind of take it to be real.
We forget we're in the movie. That's the whole point, isn't it? We get totally caught up in this story as if it's really happening.
And the whole fight or flight thing's happening, and so we create this sort of world for ourselves. So even if we can't sleep or practice mindfulness very well, we can give ourselves something more tangible to connect the attention with, like, say, read a book just with some low lighting or something like that.
Yeah.
And there's also some learners noticing how overthinking and over-preparing things, and a lot of worry. Worry does some good impersonations. It impersonates lots of useful things like planning and preparation when it's really worrying. That's what we do when we overthink.
Such a fine line between planning and preparing ourselves for things and worrying about them, isn't it?
Yeah. Because when we're grounded in the moment, planning and preparing for a future event, it's different to living the event before it's even happened and worrying how it's going to go. And some interesting things too about intuition. And now connecting with the senses, of course, switches off the default mode.
Yeah, or at least moderates it a little bit. I mean, sometimes that default mode's pretty helpful.
Oh, well,
creativity, pleasant daydreams. It's not that that's a problem, but being lost in it is a problem. So we bring in a bit of mindfulness, and it just contains it perhaps a little bit, stops us from getting too caught up in it.
Yeah, and when we, in a sense, just connect with the moment, just at present, the default mental activity switches down, and we might be inwardly quiet enough to actually hear something intuitive. And it's like a deeper, quieter, if I could use the word wiser level of mind. It has a chance to get a word in, although it doesn't really use words. It's just kind of an inner knowing, and which is, I think, what we often call intuition. Yeah,
just noticing things more clearly, perhaps be more perceptive, right?
Yeah.
Or perhaps the mind being quiet so that new insights can come up out of our sort of deeper awareness, right? Rather than just, the mind being cluttered with all that noise.
Yeah, the fog of thinking. And I think Hamlet had a bit of that. His mind was sickly dull with a pale cast of thought. And of course, that speech starts off with, to be or not to be? That is the question. They should have practiced mindfulness, I think.
Apparently Shakespeare might have.
Yeah, I suspect he would have. Richard, you had some interesting things to say also about tensions and thoughts, etc. happening.
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of our learners have asked for some tips on not engaging with thoughts, because one of the things that happens with mindfulness is we start paying attention to the body or what we're doing, and we notice that there's this overlay of thoughts. And a typical kind of reaction once we realize that's happening is to try to get rid of them. And a lot of people meditate or practice mindfulness trying to get rid of thoughts, pushing against them. But, just like trying to not think of a pink elephant, that means we're actually focusing the attention on the thoughts. And perhaps the harder we try to push them away, the more we're actually engaging with them.
Yeah.
And so the whole point of mindfulness is not to push them away and create an empty mind or even necessarily a relaxed body, but just to not be so caught up in the thoughts.
Yeah.
And so there's a big difference between pushing away and letting go. And when we can just learn to allow thoughts to come and go in the mind without engaging with them at all, that's when I think we're really practicing mindfulness at its best.
And just to use a metaphor, I mean, if you had a newspaper and you opened it up, everyone's covered with thoughts all over the place, articles, lots of thoughts, and you can look over it. and you decide to engage with one article because you're interested. You notice another article, you're just not interested, and you just move your attention on. The thought's there, but you just choose to engage with it or leave it alone. And to actually realise there's that choice is quite liberating in itself.
There's a choice when we have awareness, and I think that's really the important point. There's actually an unconscious, a subconscious appraisal process of liking and disliking and ignoring things. So before we've even become consciously aware of something, we've already decided that we like it and we want more of it, or we dislike and we want to get rid of it. And mindfulness brings that into awareness for us so that we can step out of some of that, what's sometimes called kind of craving and aversion, or disliking and liking.
Yeah. And also some interesting, and one of the challenging things to cultivate acceptance in our lives. And it's not easy. And we start to practice mindfulness, we notice how much non-acceptance is there. But we can bring awareness to the non-acceptance and not even judge that, and notice the effect of non-acceptance. We don't have to accept something, but we can observe the effect of non-acceptance and start to develop a discernment about whether that's working for us or not. And more often than not, if we can just adopt an accepting attitude, even if the things we find uncomfortable, that allows us to be at peace with them.
But there's sort of acceptance happening in the mind. I accept that. And then there's the acceptance of actually just being with it without reaction from moment to moment to moment. That's a very different beast.
So a number of other things too about changing behaviour and so on. It's not easy, changing states of mind. And just to be patient, to be gentle with ourselves, and just to be aware that it might have taken us years, decades to get into the patterns we're in. It's not going to take necessarily decades to get out of them, but it's going to take more than a week or two.
Yes.
So we should just be patient with ourselves.
But of course, any moment that we're practicing mindfulness, we're not practicing unmindfulness, and the unmindful circuits in the brain are actually just starting to get weaker. The default mode network starting to weaken and atrophy a little bit. So, it's just about keeping that practice going. That's really the important thing, and also just not spending 4 weeks in a course practicing mindfulness and then just, I've got mindfulness now. It's about, continuing this as a practice throughout the lifespan.
And even if we feel like we haven't done well in the past, or we're worrying about where we'll get to in the future, from a mindfulness perspective, the past's irrelevant.
Yes.
All we can do is just to be mindful in whatever way is appropriate now.
Yes.
And that's the opportunity. Some interesting things about the formal practice of mindfulness.
Yeah, some learners noticing that they get very sleepy when they meditate, and that's actually a very common experience. Whenever I'm teaching mindfulness, or even practicing it myself sometimes, to be honest, I notice, that there's a lot of sleepiness, and actually a lot of us are chronically tired. And once we get unstuck from all that busy thinking that kind of revs us up with nervous energy and start to get into the present moment, as that parasympathetic nervous system activates, we really start to notice that tiredness. And it's a very normal thing. It's a very normal part of meditation. Important to work with it, perhaps sitting up straighter, half opening the eyes, making sure that we're not practicing 10 minutes of sleep meditation every day. But it's a very normal thing. And in fact, in a lot of the classical wisdom traditions, they talk about working with sleepiness and agitation as being the other side of that coin. And just learning to sit with that. If the mind's busy and the body's tense, it's just about learning to sit with that without reacting to it. And if we're totally sleepy, it's about observing that coming and going and perhaps not succumbing to it.
Also guided or unguided practice. And the guided makes it easier, I think. Two things are
in the beginning anyway.
And the guidance practices, it provides two things. One is the prompt to bring the attention back, but the second thing is that hopefully the tone of the voice of the person who's guiding the practice is being non-judgmental, just noticing. And the gentleness with which we should be practicing. And when we often try to practice without the guidance, we get critical and judgmental, etc.
A lot more easily, right?
And we create a problem for ourselves. Good. So not a lot on multitasking this week, which is
that was really surprising, because in previous runs of this course, there's been so much stuff coming up around multitasking. And of course, the conversation was about other things, which I think is great. Maybe people are starting to realise that multitasking is actually an illusion, and that there's some benefit in unitasking. I think that was quite interesting.
So, great week this week, and we look forward to seeing you next week, and we'll be exploring managing our emotions, a really easy thing to do, of course, after 3 weeks of mindfulness practice, mindful eating, and a longer exercise for those who'd like to do a marathon.
See you then.